Hello, welcome back. We are recording live from GitHub Universe in San Francisco, 10-year anniversary edition. And we are at my favorite time of day, the time we get to talk to maintainers. We're going to talk about open source. We're going to talk about maintainership. And I have the privilege to have a guest who is actually not only is a product that I use myself, so I was delighted when they actually accepted the invitation, but I think all of you are immediately going to recognize. So my guest today is Robby Russell. Robby is the CEO of Planet Argon, and shout out to Planet Argon is one of Inc. magazine's best workplaces this year, and so were they last year. That's amazing. He's also a creator of this little project that you probably use yourself. He's the host of Maintainable Software podcast, and we will link on the notes so you can subscribe to that podcast as well. And also a guitarist in the Mighty Missoula band. Yeah. What? Thank you so much for accepting the invitation.
Thanks
Robby.
for having me.
There is a million things we can talk about. I want to talk about this amazing epic t-shirt first of all.
I got you stickers with the same look. So here you go.
This is the best. Oh my gosh, thank you so much. Welcome. This is going on my laptop immediately. And as you can tell, I don't put just any sticker on my laptop. No, you don't. Tell me about this little project, this little crazy project.
Yeah, so I think of Oh My Zsh started because I was a lazy programmer. So a little over 15 years ago, actually this story starts about 2 years before that. So about 17 years ago, I was introduced to Zsh from some friends in the Ruby on Rails community. And some original GitHub co-founders were part of that little club as well. But we were sharing and trading ideas on how to improve our terminal prompt with each other through IRC channels and through pasty, like kind of like gist type of website configurations. And so I built up this really complex configuration file for my Zsh config, but then I would be pair programming with a coworker on their laptop, and they had default bash installed, and none of my shortcuts worked on their computer. And so I would get frustrated, not with them, but with myself, because I couldn't remember how to type everything out anymore, all the shortcuts I had become reliant on. And so I would try to convince my coworkers, like, hey, can you just copy and paste my Zsh configuration file in this pasty? And some of them did, and they would use it. And others, they like to understand how things work before they use them, which I'm not that kind of person necessarily. But I did have coworkers that they wanted me to explain everything in my config file. And the brutal answer was that I only understood maybe 30 to 40% of the code that was in my config. So I decided to spend a couple hours on a Saturday cleaning up and refactoring my config file. And I pulled up the Zsh official documentation, and I thought I would start adding some comments and try to explain it. And then as I did that, I was like, I'm going to organize the file. And I'm like, maybe I should move it into some smaller files. And so I created a new directory, moved everything into some smaller files, created a new Git repository for it because it wasn't under version control, and I was afraid I was going to break it. And so if I could undo things. And so I decided I would call it Oh My Zsh because I had worked on another project about a little bit before that called Oh My Science, and just use the same naming convention. It was like, this is my Zsh config. I had a README file. I'm like, this is how you installed it, which was basically just Git cloning the project into your local computer. Carlos installed it on Monday.
Okay, you convinced him.
Yeah, and the thing about that project was at the time there was nothing like all the things that people know about Oh My Zsh, because it comes with hundreds of themes and hundreds of plugins and initial functions. None of that was even remotely on my radar. I didn't plan the project to be this thing that a big community would grow. I literally just wanted a handful of my coworkers to have my config file on their computers so that I could show them how to maybe speed up their workflow a little bit, also to get useful little prompts in your terminal prompt. And so that was immediately solved that problem. But then the next day, one of my other coworker named Gary said, how do I change the colors? And I was like, why? My color choices were perfect. And so I told him where he can change the files in the clone of the repository. So he made some changes, and then other coworkers started adding some new shortcuts and aliases for themselves, and they started contributing to the project. But Gary couldn't do a git pull anymore because he had made changes to his local file. So he was like, I have a conflict. Do I need to stash it and reapply it? And then it was like Robby's colors and then Gary's colors. I'm like, this is going to be messy. So I decided, maybe we'll call this a theme. So I just created a directory called themes and moved the original version into Robby Russell. And then I had another one for Gary. And then you just would set which one you would want. And the default would be mine because it was my thing. But I'm like, here's how you can override it by calling the Gary theme. And then when you loaded it up, it would use a different theme. So that's how themes got started. But I also posted about it on my blog, and I'm a Ruby on Rails developer. About a month after that, someone reached out and said, hey, Oh My Zsh, I like this tool, but it seems to assume you're a Ruby on Rails developer. But I work with Python and Django. How can I disable the Ruby stuff? Because I want to also contribute some Python things. And I was like, that's a good question. I don't need the Python stuff loaded from me right now, unless I'm working on a Python project. So I'm like, maybe we'll call those plugins. And so I moved all
this stuff. And plugins were born.
And plugins were born. And that just became a playground for people to start contributing ideas. So that's how the genesis of that project was. It was literally, I just wanted my coworkers to have my config on their computer so that I could show them how to do a couple of cool tricks. And it just snowballed and became this virus that spread around the community for the past 15 plus years. So
can you say, top of mind, how many themes you have now?
We stopped accepting them at about 140 or 150 themes.
Wow.
And people still try to submit them. Not create your own. There's like hundreds out there that people create and share on their own Git repositories and stuff like that. So it was a little, I don't know, but it was just like, yeah, sure, whatever. It was just a big fun thing, playground at the time. Git still pretty new because that was released in 2009, and I think GitHub came out in 2008.
Yeah, like literally it was about a year before.
I was user 257.
Oh, that is some giant flex.
I had to look it up the other day.
To look that up for myself.
I'm here with one of the other maintainers of the project, and he's been working on Oh My Zsh for about 3 years now.
Yeah.
And so he looked his number up, and he was 66 million something.
Oh, it's insane.
And which is like the difference between 257 and 60. So that's been interesting to watch GitHub grow to that sort of scale over the years.
I bet.
Oh My Zsh has, I think, somewhere over 300 plugins. We've had code contributions from over 2,400 developers.
All over the world.
All over the world. A lot of people say it's their first project they've ever been able to contribute to. So it's very approachable for people. Most of the time now, it's just like the community's sending stuff and we're just trying to figure out, does this make sense to share with everybody, or is it just like a thing that someone can keep in their own fork of it? And then, so I think of myself as the creator, but more of the curator of the project, because a lot of those original ideas were from things I was copy and pasting from different friends and sharing things and me trying to figure stuff out. And I cannot remember who shared what in my initial config files, but it worked and I knew how to use it, but I didn't understand what all the code did. But yeah, it's been an interesting ride the last over 15 years now.
When you released the project on GitHub, it was open source from the get-go?
Yep.
When you decided, I'm going to make it a thing.
Yeah,
first was open source.
There was no other, I don't think of any other, there was no other option, because all the code that I had already been adding to my file was just small snippets of things that I had copy and pasted from other people or things I had figured out or written myself, largely inspired by just what other people were sharing in their config files. So that's just like the way people ask me, like, oh, you have this project, maybe we talk about the open source zone here at GitHub Universe, but there was never any idea of this is a thing that can sell or anything. It was just like, this is just my Zsh configuration. Who would ever want to pay for something like that? Anyways, so it's just, of course I would share. And it was like, here's how I'm using Zsh, and maybe you'll want to use Zsh too.
So Robby, you created this project to fix your problem, right? You wanted to share your configs, and then we're thinking about how you convince people to switch from Bash to Zsh.
Yeah.
And I think there's probably been a growth and adoption there because of your project, I would say. It makes it easier for people who maybe want to customize things.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, I don't know that I have looked up Google Trends and maybe a little bit of if you ever Google yourself, I'm guessing, over the years, but I was curious to see how Zshell's search terms has paralleled Oh My Zshell's growth over the years. And so I do think Oh My Zshell has done a lot to increase the adoption to it. Apple did make it the default eventually, but that was not because of Oh My Zshell. That was because of a licensing thing that Bash changed their license, which made it incompatible with the way Apple sells their software.
Oh, that's an interesting fact. Okay.
So that was why they did that. And so people will, you can still go back and use Bash and stuff like that, but they couldn't make it the default anymore. So just Oh My Zshell just happened to already be the thing. Like, how do I customize Zshell, or how do I do things? And so we've already built up a lot of SE, suppose you can call it, because we dominated because there's so many people talking about how to install it, how to configure it, how to write your own plugins or your own themes with it. If anything, the Zshell adoption, definitely Oh My Zshell has been part of that, but Zshell's been a great thing for a really long time. It's almost as old as Bash is. And I think Zshell had been around for at least a decade, maybe before I started using it. So it just was like less popular because Bash was the default on most Linux operating systems and Unix environments. I've seen comments by people from the original Z Shell maintainer group that haven't historically loved Oh My Zsh because people confuse what's the difference between Oh My Zsh and Z Shell.
Oh, interesting.
And I can't really control that necessarily, but some people will go report maybe a bug that they're experiencing with Z Shell group, and they're like, that's a Oh My Zsh problem, not an us problem. So I think they've just gotten tired of having to field those requests sometimes. But that's just the way open source works.
Shout out to them, and hey, that's the power of open source, right? I have to ask, throw me a number. How many downloads, installs? What are we thinking? It's 15 years worth of project.
Here's an interesting thing. So I took when I first created Oh My Zsh, historically a lot of projects you would download like a tarball or a zip file, and then you would install it or something. And I decided, because Git was fairly new, and I thought it would be an interesting way to distribute it using Git itself, and also to keep it updated. Oh My Zsh, you do a Git clone from the GitHub repository, and so GitHub does track that, but it doesn't give you like historical data that far back because it's such a big popular project that there used to be a time when you like click on the forks tab to see the network of all the projects, people that have forked it, it would just crash that page because it couldn't handle for Oh My Zsh. So I don't have any stats because we only get the clones, and I haven't looked at the numbers in a while. It could be, sometimes you'd see like 15,000 clones a day or something.
Wow.
I don't know that number accounts for Git pull. So there's no stats, and other projects that if you distribute via download, they will track downloads for those files, but we didn't distribute it that way. So I don't have any idea how many people use it. I know how many people have bought t-shirts, stickers, how many people have followed us on Twitter, X, and things like that over the years, and how many people have starred the project. I think we're at like 174,000 stars.
Wow.
So it's maybe at least that many, but also maybe people just bookmark it because they're curious about it. I have no idea how many people.
I would dare say it's a lot more than that.
I feel like I've met that many people now.
I can say that it's definitely beyond the star count. 100%. Right. That's amazing. 15 years of project. You have a lovely community, by the way, as well. So I want to talk a little bit about how people can get involved. And then also, please, folks, buy the t-shirts, buy the stickers, because, hey, sponsor the project, please. But let's talk about why you're here. I think you must be one of the first. There's got to be some data about the first open source projects that were like on GitHub.
We used to put us on the homepage.
Oh, yes.
There were a couple. I remember one design, you'd scroll down towards the bottom and our logo was there. And I'm like, so I've taken screenshots of those over the years. I'm really proud of that. And I think GitHub also helped promote us. And I actually found they used to have I think it was a podcast. I forget what it was called early on in the GitHub days. And they mentioned Oh My Zsh. And I'm like, oh, that was probably what sparked quite a bit of growth. I had a pretty popular blog back in the day as well in the Ruby on Rails community. But I think that GitHub, when they announced or they mentioned Oh My Zsh, was like a cool new thing that was released a month ago on GitHub. You should check it out. I think people started using it then. And that probably helped it go beyond the Ruby on Rails community that I was part of, and maybe brought in that person that brought in their Python question to me. That wasn't the group that I was part of necessarily. But yeah, we've been part of that over the years and such.
That's awesome. And so you're here at GitHub Universe as part of an initiative that is brand new. We'll have to this conference. We actually done that in a few other conferences earlier this year, which is the open source zone. So select projects were invited to come and have sort of an expo, right? An opportunity to talk to your users. Curious to see how many people have you met, maybe not numbers. I'm sure you have conversations, all kinds of conversations. How has it been?
It was fun. We spent all day yesterday. So it was me and one of other co-maintainers. There's 3 maintainers right now on Oh My Zsh. Carlo came from Barcelona, so we really appreciate GitHub helping us. His first trip to the United States, he's got to spend some time doing some sightseeing as well, and we've got to spend some time together. We only met each other for the first time earlier this year in Berlin.
After how many years?
Carlo's been on the project for 3 years, and Mark has been on the project for about a little over a decade, and all 3 of us were able to meet in Berlin at another conference where we got a booth with at the Merge that I believe GitHub also sponsored that as well. So we were there as well. And so that was the first time I actually ever met Mark in person after a decade of having Google meetings and Zoom meetings every once in a while and talking over Discord and GitHub issues and stuff. So that was pretty exciting. But yeah, yesterday we were in the open source zone. There's 5 projects yesterday. And some of the other ones that our neighbors were like Home Assistant and Kubernetes were there. And so get to chat with them too. But there was a lot of people coming up and being like, oh, I love the project. I've been using it for such a long time. Like it's been the first thing I install on my new computer. And I show all of my coworkers how to use this. And they're always like, how did you make it do that? I love hearing those stories. I'm always thinking, I didn't anticipate that all these other people would be like, you have to use this. That was literally what happened when I first started. So it's just like the same story kept perpetuating itself. And I know a lot of coding schools have introduced people to Oh My Zsh, and so people like junior developers learning how to program, they're maybe unfamiliar with the terminal and the CLI, and Oh My Zsh just makes it feel a little bit cozier, and it's helpful.
Is lovely.
And so I think that has just propagated. So back to the open source zone, it was interesting yesterday because we were also surrounded by, in the corner of like a lot of exhibitors happening for sponsored companies. And so there were several people that came up and they were really confused, and they're like, wait, is Oh My Zsh a company? What are you selling? Are you? So we made up some jokes like, oh yeah, we're working on Oh My Zsh AI, and we're trying to reach 1 billion developers to use Oh My Zsh.
Stop it, Robby. That's so funny.
But no, it was fun. I'm like, no, we're just here. GitHub brought us in to just get to meet people. I'm like, I'm giving away stickers all day and getting to shake hands and meet people. And so that was fun. A few people were like, convince me to use Oh My Zsh.
No, we're going back 15 years now.
Yeah, I'm like, I will walk you through a few things and give a couple of demos. But I'm like, if you're not interested in it, then that's fine. But yeah, it was a lot of fun just to get meeting a lot of people yesterday. Like
meeting a lot of
people. We gave a lot of stickers out yesterday, and a lot of people were just like so excited, and people taking little videos because they're like, "Oh, my son loves your project, and he's going to be so jealous that I met you." And I'm just like, I appreciate that. So yeah, really appreciate GitHub bringing us here to do that.
That's awesome. Thank you for accepting the invitation. So you've been a maintainer of this project now for 15 years. Yeah. Is this the longest project that you maintain? Like this?
Except for my business.
Yeah, except for your business, of course.
Yeah. So that's been a little over 20 years. This is like maybe makes the top. I have other projects that I'm involved in. I run a business, I have a band. So I've never treated this particular project like it needs to be a big priority in my life. It's always like several below maybe the top 5 projects sometimes.
Healthy maintainer you are.
If you think about it, I always felt like it was finished day one. Everything else that's evolved since then, it's been performance improvements, maybe some bug fixes. But a lot of the stuff is community driven. So most of the code is contributed from other people that are helping build. I don't build new plugins very often. So that stuff's coming in from, back to that, I'm not a creator of things. I'm not inventing things. We're curating things that the community are like, hey, this would be really helpful for me. Maybe this would be helpful for someone else, which is how Oh My Zsh started as well. So I think that oftentimes when we have remember about a year and a half ago, we might have had closer to 500 open pull requests on a regular basis. And now we're like maybe around a little over 300. And I'm like, I don't know what our goal is to try to get. We're not going to get to 0 because people keep submitting things and new ideas for things. And so it's just a matter of like, how much time can we spend every month while we all have our own jobs? It doesn't make us any money. And anyone that's savvy enough to want to add new functionality to it probably knows how to fork the project, make those changes for themselves. And they've submitted it to us. And if the only thing we might be holding people back from is getting to use other people to get exposed to something that someone else made, I don't feel like people are looking at their terminal like, when is that new feature coming from? Nobody ever asks me that. Outside of but you can also go, and we have a lot of people in the community that will help out so people want to contribute to the project. There's a lot of projects, like open PRs that we are needing people that use those specific plugins to do testing on. So we have a lot of people that will like, hey, I use these Kubernetes plugins. And so they're always around to help out and test those if we're adding some new functionality that someone's contributed. Because I don't know how to use the Kubernetes stuff that much. We rely on the community to be like, oh, this works for me, this works for me. And once we get several people to approve things like that, then we'll be like, great, it passed. We're able to lint it. It doesn't seem to break on anything. We'll merge it. So I don't feel like we're holding people back. And we also want to keep Oh My Zsh just simple for people that just want to install it and get like the defaults and maybe add a few plugins. And we don't want to break things. And we're still distributing it via Git. And it just asks you every few weeks, you want to check for new updates, and it'll just pull things down, and you can get the little change log, and maybe that might spark, ooh, what's that plugin I didn't know about? And so that just keeps people feeling, it's such an interesting project because I think, why do people seem to love it so much? What is it about feeling delightful? And I'm like, maybe it is just that ASCII screen with the rainbow and it pops.
That's a big part for me.
It's like a little moment of where I've had people yell at me for that functionality. So it's just some people love it and some people really do not. And they're like, get out of my way. I'm just trying to do my work. And so if you can turn that off. I think by us having some of those auto update functionality and showing people, even if you're not actively working on the project yourself, I think it like just allows you to feel a little bit more connected to the project.
100%.
You're like,
Yeah.
oh, there's activity here.
Yeah.
And it's also the very similar experience to when you're working on a project with your coworkers at work, and you might be doing a Git pull on a project that you haven't touched in a week, but you're like, what have my coworkers have been working on in this repository? It's the same interaction. It's like on part of a thing, you can't push to Oh My Zsh's thing, but you can pull whenever you want.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, so that part I think resonates with people. So it just feels like you're
a part of it.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
So what are you thinking for the next 15 years of Oh My Zsh?
I know if you had asked me 14 years ago
you'd be like, what? This is not going to be happening.
No, I thought Oh My Zsh would be like useful for a couple of years and people would outgrow it. I didn't expect so many people to be like, oh, actually I use it. I added 3 plugins and I just leave the rest of it. I have one theme that I like or something. So it's been a weird surprise this whole time. So I wouldn't have anticipated to be 15 years old, but to say in 15 more years, I will be a much older person. And then I hope that the project is still fun for the people that are working on it. And maybe I'll still be involved at that point. I don't know why I wouldn't necessarily, especially if I'm able to maintain my ability to only work on it when I feel like I'm in the mood to and not feel obligated to. There's also an interesting thing where trying to attract more maintainers to the project can be a challenge because not everybody wants to spend a lot of time working on triaging a project of such volume of incoming pull requests. It's a lot for us to keep up with sometimes too. So if the more people use it, the more people want to add new things, and then it can be a lot to keep up with. So that's a challenge for us to work on a little bit. But I don't know if we're not going to be adding any AI functionality that I know.
Heard it here first.
I think I'm really excited about, there are a lot of new terminals that are coming out. I met someone from one yesterday even, and I think it's called Wave, and I've been a beta tester of Ghosty, and I got, one of the nice things about doing a project like Oh My Zsh is that everyone that works on a new terminal will reach out to us 6 months before they announce their project to the public and be like, will you test this for me? Would this be useful? And so that's interesting, that I think there's going to be a lot of evolution in the terminal CLI space in general. A lot of people are building more CLI tools. And I like to think that Oh My Zsh will help maybe inspire, hey, maybe this environment can be a little bit cozier, a little bit friendlier, more delightful, and it doesn't need to feel like this intimidating black screen or whatever the default colors in your terminal are, and you're like I'm some hacker on a computer in some movie or something. I'm like, no, you're like, don't be afraid of the CLI. You're not going to break everything unless you break everything.
That is delightful. No, I think that's what is so attractive, this project. I know definitely I was looking for that coziness. That's why I'm a user and will continue to be a user forever. Thank you so much. So if folks are actually watching this and they're thinking, you know what, I love this project, I've been using it forever, and maybe I want to give it a go as to getting involved and helping out, like, how can they do this?
Yeah, just head over to Oh My Zsh, just search for Oh My Zsh anywhere, and you'll probably find it pretty quickly. But we have our Oh My Zsh's website, ends with .sh, or GitHub's Oh My Zsh. Nice little README there. I'm really proud of the text that I wrote there, and you could pretty quickly install it. If you take you 30 seconds to try it out, and if you don't like it, there's a command that you can run just to quickly revert that. It just does a git clone from a project and change a couple configuration things on your computer. But it's pretty safe to try it and remove it if it doesn't work for you.
All right.
Yeah.
How can people get a hold of you for that?
Yeah, we've got a Discord server as well. So that's also linked in our various spaces. And so if you pop in there and definitely start chiming in on tickets, and we do notice the people who are helping there, and we'll take notice of them and ask them if they want to step up their involvement a little bit more in the project.
Nice. Awesome. Then hopefully 15 years from now, that will be a larger group.
Hopefully.
But I really appreciate what you shared. I think we need to have you back so you can teach us all how to have such good balance with things.
I'd be happy to chat with that.
Really, because that's so important. And this is a project that's had a 10 years, 15 years is a long time.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're still like happy about maintaining it, or I'm assuming you're happy about maintaining it.
I feel like this year's a little bit of a celebrating the 50th birthday. It feels like a little bit of a victory lap. We made it. And then, but then I'm also working with Mark and Carlo on the project, and Carlo is more than 20 years younger than me. So it's interesting getting to spend time with him, and he's been doing this for 3 years now. It's just interesting to see there's such an age range of the people that I'm even collaborating with. So I love that about open source, is that I get to meet these interesting people that are just in different places in their life than I am. And so it's okay, cool, this is in good hands. If something happened to me, it'll keep going.
So Thank you for that. Sounds like you have a really good core team, and the three of you.
They're delightful, yeah.
That's awesome. Robby, thank you so much for coming by.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for taking your time to come by. If you want to contribute to the project, please do join their Discord. I'll be sure to drop all that on the show notes.
Much appreciated.
So I hope you have an amazing rest of universe. I hope that this AI, oh my seashell, that's never going to take off.
Yeah.
It's not a topic of conversation, and folks come and talk to you and just really, I feel like that space should be more a space of people just coming to say thank you.
Maybe.
Thank you, maintainers. Be my sign for next year. If you walk into a space, you're coming in to just say thank you to maintainers and to pose interesting questions or offer help. Thank you, Robby. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, it's amazing to meet you. And
likewise.
I cannot wait to put this bad boy on my computer. Yeah.
Maybe I can send you one of these t-shirts.
I will. I'll go in and buy it. That's what I need to do.
I'll give you a discount code.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us. Please go ahead and go give Oh My Zsh a try. It's a